Interesting, thought-provoking, relevant, conversations that matters the most. Let's talk beyond the basics.
And here's the part that really gets me. We spend so much time talking about diet trends, what to cut, what to add, what everyone seems to be trying, but almost nobody talks about the quality of the food itself. Not even most doctors bring it up when they talk about healthy eating or preventing disease. It's like this entire piece of the puzzle has been quietly left out of the conversation. And that silence isn't random. When the people who grow, process, and market our food get to shape the story, they decide what we pay attention to. If we are busy debating the latest diet trend, we are not asking deeper questions about what's actually going into our bodies. So today, I want to bring that missing piece right back into the center of what we call healthy living, because the quality of our food and the chemicals wrapped around it absolutely belongs in the conversation about health, prevention, and what we choose to put on our plates. First, let's review and understand the common terminologies. Organic means it was grown using organic farming method that bans synthetic pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, and GMOs. It relies on compost, natural minerals, and soil biology. Non-organic is commonly known as conventional. And conventional farming uses synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides. These chemicals don't disappear. They remain on food, they drift into the air, seep into the soil, and wash into the rivers. This is the first layer of the quiet invasion. GMO. GMO refers to genetically modified crops that have had their DNA altered in a lab, usually to tolerate herbicides or resist insects. An important note here is that independent long term studies on human consumption are limited because patents restrict outside research. Most of the verbiage and marketing around GMO products is focused on maintaining the same taste as the original. Non GMO. Non GMO simply means the seed wasn't genetically engineered. However, it does not mean that it's chemical free. If you're wondering, can a convention farm become organic? The answer is yes. Switching from conventional to organic isn't a quick label change, it's a full transformation. It's absolutely possible, but it takes real serious commitment. A farm has to go through a 36-month transition period where the land is managed without prohibited synthetic chemicals. During these 3 years, farmers must stop using synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. They must use only approved organic inputs. They must build soil health through compost, cover crops, and crop rotation. They must maintain detailed records of everything they apply and everything they grow, and they must allow inspectors to verify their practices. Only after those 3 years can anything grown on that land be certified as organic. This is why organic food often costs more. The farmers have to invest years before they can even sell something as organic. But it also shows something important. Conventional farms can absolutely become organic farms. It's not a fixed identity, it's a choice and a process. I want to talk about a common misconception about the backyard gardening. People assume that the produce from their backyard is naturally organic and it is of good quality. That's because when people buy seed packets for their backyard garden, they usually assume they are natural or harmless. But here's the truth. If a seed packet is not labeled organic, it is not organic. If it is not labeled non GMO, you cannot assume it's non GMO. Growing a GMO seed using organic methods does not make the produce organic. So, a GMO seed can never become organic later because the genetic engineering is built into the seed itself. No amount of compost or love or organic gardening practices can change its DNA. So, even if someone grows a tomato plant in their backyard with zero chemicals, if the seed was GMO, the tomato is still GMO. Certifications. These labels help you understand how your food was grown, so you can look for these labels. USDA Organic bans GMOs, synthetic pesticides, and synthetic fertilizers. EU Organic is one of the most strictest global standards. They have strong limits on chemicals and additives. Non-GMO Project Verified ensures no genetic engineering but does not regulate pesticide use. JAS Organic from Japan bans synthetic chemicals and GMOs. They require soil health practices. India Organic prohibits synthetic pesticides and GMO seeds. They are not perfect, but they offer traceability and accountability, two things the modern food system often lacks. Now let's talk about GMO adoption. When we talk about GMOs, we are not talking about a small corner of agriculture. We are talking about the backbone of processed food, livestock feed, restaurant oils, and packaged snacks. Here's what the data shows. Soybeans, 96% of the crops grown in US are GMO. 72% globally. Corn, 92% of the crops in US are GMO, 34% globally. Cotton, 93% GMO in the US, and globally it's about 76%. Canola, it's widely GMO'd in the US, about 24% GMO globally. To summarize, the foods that dominate processed products, soy, corn, cottonseed oil, canola, are overwhelmingly GMO. Rice and wheat remain non-GMO, but they are still exposed to synthetic chemicals. Now let's understand monoculture farms. When you hear the word monoculture, think of those endless fields of just one crop, miles and miles of only corn or only soy or only wheat. It looks clean and efficient from the outside, but underneath, it creates a system that depends heavily on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Monoculture means planting the same crop on the same land year after year, which disrupts the natural balance of the soil. Each crop pulls out the same nutrients over and over, and because nothing different is ever planted, the soil never gets a chance to rebuild what was taken. Research shows that monoculture significantly depletes soil fertility, disrupts nutrient cycles, and weakens soil structure. As the soil gets poorer, the plants become weaker, and weak plants attract pests and diseases. That's when farmers reach out for more synthetic fertilizers to feed the soil and more pesticides to fight off the pests. Over time, this creates a vicious cycle. The more soil is drained, the more chemicals are needed to keep the crops alive. Studies highlight that continuous monocropping accelerates nutrient depletion and increases reliance on synthetic fertilizers, which can further degrade soil health. So every year, the chemical load doesn't go down, it goes up. And all of that ends up in the soil, the water, the surrounding ecosystems, and eventually in the food system we rely on. Also, when it rains, these chemicals wash into rivers. They travel hundreds of miles and eventually reach the ocean. In the US, the Mississippi River carries these runoff to the Gulf of Mexico, now known as the Gulf of America. The ocean near the Mississippi River Basin has now become a dead zone, which means there is not enough oxygen for any marine life to survive. The size of this dead zone is now about 6,334 square miles. Today, there are more than 400 ocean dead zones worldwide, areas where oxygen levels are so low that marine life cannot survive. This is the environmental cost of cheap food. Honey feels like one of the cleanest foods on earth, but bees bring back whatever's in their environment, and today that often includes pesticide residues like neonicotinoids, which is very toxic. Even tiny amounts can throw off a bee's navigation, immunity, and ability to survive. That's part of the reason we are seeing so many hive losses, what's known as the colony collapse disorder, which is driven by pesticides, habitat loss, parasites, and climate stress. And because a third of our food depends on pollinators, their struggle becomes our struggle. And here's the fact most people don't know: the USDA will not certify any honey produced in the US as organic. So, any organic honey labeling you might see is imported. Unfortunately, honey isn't the pure, untouched food it used to be. We are not just eating chemicals, we are breathing them, we are drinking them, we are absorbing them through our skin. Even though each exposure might be certified as within safe levels and marked as not toxic, the fact is that some chemicals don't leave the body easily. If exposure exceeds the body's ability to process and remove chemicals, accumulation may occur. Over time, the toxins start accumulating and they build up in fat, liver, kidneys, tissues, and so on. This is called bioaccumulation. This buildup can disrupt hormones, immunity, and cellular functions, leading to chronic conditions. If you want to understand bioaccumulation, look at newborns. The Environmental Working Group conducted a neonatal toxicity study and they found 287 industrial chemicals in the cord blood of US newborns. Of these, 180 cause cancer in humans or animals, 217 are toxic to the brain and nervous system, 208 cause birth defects or abnormal development. These include pesticides, flame retardants, industrial byproducts, and chemicals from consumer products. What does this mean? It means that a baby who has never eaten, never breathed, or touched the outside world already carries the chemical burden of modern life. Now, this is the quiet invasion. Here's another study. Researchers at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai detected 42 PFAS chemicals, also known as forever chemicals, in the umbilical cord blood. These chemicals have crossed the placenta and accumulated in the fetus. PFAS are linked to cancers, immune disruption, and developmental issues. This is why chronic diseases rise even when exposure levels seem small, and newborns prove this point. If a baby who has never eaten, breathed, or touched the outside world already carries dozens or hundreds of chemicals, it means that the mother's lifetime exposure becomes the baby's first exposure. So, be aware of this quiet invasion. The missing conversation in medicine. When doctors talk about healthy eating, they usually say eat more fruits and vegetables, cut down on sugar, avoid processed foods. But almost no one talks about the quality of those fruits and vegetables, whether they are organic or heavily sprayed, whether they are GMO or non GMO, whether they carry residues of herbicides like glyphosate. See, 100 years ago, foods like soy, corn, and honey were fundamentally different. They weren't genetically engineered, they weren't drenched in herbicides, bees weren't navigating landscapes filled with synthetic chemicals. So, in fact, what we now need to understand is that the category of food hasn't changed, but the chemical reality behind those foods have changed. Efforts are being taken to destigmatize GMOs one bite at a time. You'll find GMO themed food trucks popping up across the country near the malls, and they are using street food to showcase how modern biotechnology works and to convince people that engineered crops can be both innovative and delicious. They even explain how they take extra efforts to maintain the same nutrients. Again, as I mentioned earlier, no study has been conducted on long term impact, so we actually do not know the safety aspect of it. I had already mentioned about soy and corn that are widely used genetically modified products. Now, here are some more for your awareness. GM sugar beets, the adoption is 99% in the US. GM papaya is 80% adoption. GM potatoes is 25% adoption, and the numbers are constantly increasing year by year. GM squash, 15% adoption. GM apples, 1%, mostly in the Texas and Florida, it's widely adopted. And 0.1% adoption already happening in salmon farming. Mexico has now written corn protection into its constitution. They've banned the planting of genetically modified corn to safeguard their native varieties of corn that's been part of their culture for thousands of years. And this isn't hypothetical. Mexico has seen the devastating impacts of cross pollination between the GM farm and their heritage varieties. They realized that GM adoption has also weakened biodiversity and increased pest problems and plant diseases. Because of this ban, they are facing some backlashes from Canada and US. For the past 20 years, Environmental Working Group has been regularly conducting tests for pesticide residues and publishes their results. Here's from their 2025 and 2024 Dirty Dozen list with the highest amounts of chemical residues. Please make a note of these products so you can shop wisely. This year's top 12 dirty products are spinach, strawberries, kale, collard and mustard greens, grapes, peaches, cherries, nectarines, pears, apple, blackberries, blueberries, and potatoes. So, the next time you pick an apple, a jar of honey, or a bag of corn chips, remember food is not just food. It's a story about soil, seeds, chemicals, ecosystems, and the invisible choices that shape our health. We can't control everything, but we can choose awareness. We can ask better questions. We can care not just about what we eat, but how it was grown. Because the quiet invasion of modern agriculture into our bodies is real. And every informed choice we make is one small act of protection for ourselves, our families, and the planet.